Joining me now, folks, is New York Islanders superfan Matt Di Giacomo. He's also the PA announcer for the New York Red Bulls 2 of the USL and scorekeeper / PA for the New Jersey Hitmen. Matt, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing well, Tom. Thank you for inviting me on and allowing me to be here. A little less optimistic after last night, but still got a lot of things to say about this run.
Yeah, I know it was definitely a tough game last night, but before we kind of get into the X's and O's of that, I just kind of wanted to give the folks a little bit of background on you. So can you tell us a little bit about your YouTube page and when did you first become an Islanders fan?
Yeah, Big Red Sports. I started that page in 16-17, but my trip with the Islanders starts in the lockout season, 2012-2013. I come from what I call a sports agnostic family, so basically no tethering, no mainline observations in the family. So when I got into hockey at the behest of Rangers and Devils fans, friends, it was basically pick a team throughout that lockout year because it had come back in January of 13. And I got fascinated with the Islanders run. And what really locked me in actually was Game 4 against Pittsburgh that year, where they got blown out. Or I don't know, remember if they got blown up Game 3, but they lost Game 3. And then they came out in Game 4 and they smacked them down. And the Coliseum crowd, the atmosphere coming from the TV was like nothing I was seeing on other channels or other fan bases. So that hooked me in. And at first, it was a rough go at first, but I think I'm making the dividends now all these years later. I think I made a good choice.
Absolutely. I know there's been a lot of success around the Islanders organization as of late, bringing in Barry Trotz as the head coach. And in Game 4 of the series, we'll touch upon a little lighter note of this series with Tampa Bay. Obviously, they do lead 3-2 after last night's 8-0 win. But Saturday, Game 4, Ryan Pulock had a save heard around the island. Sliding save off Ryan McDonough's backhand shot at the buzzer. What was your initial reaction to that play? And how exciting was that play?
Oh, that was like, first of all, I thought that was in because you could kind of feel the Lightning fabricating something. I mean, the 2 goals going in, the timeout by Barry Trotz just to kind of settle him down, really reminiscent of what they did in Game 5 on the road against the Bruins. They were up 5-2, 5-3. No, 5-2. They're up 5-2. Third goal goes in. Fourth goal goes in. Settles things down. And since Boychuk retired, I don't understand if the defense or if the players have a fascination with trying to do what. So Boychuk would grab the puck behind the net, and he would have such a commanding slap shot that he would just clap it from behind the net, and it would rim around the side of the rink and out. Now Pulock grabs the puck behind the net, tries to do that. It gets lost halfway up out of the zone, and he sets himself up for what probably will go down as just one of the greatest plays in New York sports playoff history, regardless, again, of this series outcome, whatever the heck happens in the next couple of games, 1 or 2, whatever. Just the astuteness, because he lost it, and he was aware enough to see what was going on in front. The spinorama by McDonough, Varley coming all out of the paint to challenge. The backhand goes on, and I think I don't even remember watching it because I had my hands on my face. But just the mesh of blue and the little black dot that slides out to the side, that was everything. We exploded. I exploded here. My friend who doesn't watch hockey, who was just casually like in the room, whoa! That's the kind of play that like makes fans out of new watchers. That was exactly what they needed and more, and then some.
You mentioned how that was one of the biggest plays, potentially New York sports history. Is it safe to say that was the biggest play of the playoffs so far?
Yeah. Of this run?
Yes.
Yeah. Without that goal, the Islanders don't have a chance, even though they dropped Game 5 pretty decidedly. Whether they lost 1-0, 2-1 in overtime, it's a loss, no matter how ugly.
Yeah.
So they put themselves in a chance to win because if they were heading into Tampa down 2 at dropping both of the Coliseum with a chance for them to clinch in 5, there's no chance for them at that point. But this gave them it gave them life. It gave them a reminder that they can shut them down, and they can shut down if they're all on the same page. which, don't know what the heck that was last night, but if they keep playing like they did in Game 4, maybe they have a better shot.
One thing I noticed with the Islanders, too, it's not just about one guy. It's a team-oriented effort, as where with a lot of other hockey teams, you have one face of the team. With the Islanders, in my opinion at least, you don't really have that. Now, I think that's kind of what has helped them throughout these playoffs, but kind of moving into last night, Monday night, the Lightning beat the Islanders 8-0 in Game 5, scoring 3 goals in each of the first 2 periods. What went wrong strategy-wise for the Islanders? I'm sure there's a lot of different things. I mean, I watched the game. I was shocked, to say the least.
Well, in short, what went wrong was everything, because they couldn't establish themselves at all. I mean, you expected a push from Tampa, right? Mm-hmm. They're tied 2-2. They're heading back to Game 5 at home. Everyone knows, who follows hockey and who follows best of 7 sports in general, more than 75% of the time, if you win Game 5, you win the series. That's stats, what they speak for themselves. It might even be higher for the Stanley Cup playoffs. They got the first goal in about 45 seconds. It was like 19 minutes on the clock. Second goal goes in. It's maybe a minute after that. Third goal halfway through the third. Was it on Varlamov? No. The first goal that went in was, just a clean pick, whatever. Tampa's going to get those looks, 1-0. They really weren't playing badly. The second goal, deflecting off of Green's glove, sliding under the 5-hole of Varlamov. It was probably one of the worst sequence of breaks you could have gotten. And then the third goal, pinballing off of Varlamov's arm, off of his back into the net. Like, it almost was like they weren't getting any of the bounces. But even when they were down 3-0 and to start the second period, they came out a pretty good amount of juice. I mean, they could have gotten one if it wasn't Andrei Vasilevskiy in net, but it was Andrei Vasilevskiy in net, and they had a little bit of a flurry. They take a bad penalty, and then bam, 4-0 Tampa. That was kind of the backbreaker there. No cohesion. They almost looked, and they kind of did it against the Bruins in the first game, and in some of the games, they almost look like they respect them to the point where they're intimidated when they get a rush. Rather than when they played Game 1, when the Islanders played Game 1 against Tampa, they stood up to them. They kept everything on the outside, played the body, made them take bad shots, made them force decisions that led to either turnovers or just, a annulled play. They weren't doing any of that. They were giving them too much space. Tampa would come in, and rather than push out, they kind of turtled, and which is what you would expect them to do when they're trying to shut a game down with a lead, or if they're killing a penalty, which they did a lot of that last night too. Not killed, but went on the kill.
Yeah.
But they kind of compressed and they turtled, and behaviorally speaking, like, it's indicative of what their mindset was. Not a lot of guys were on, and then the Barzal cross check, just to kind of add the icing on the poop cake, if you will, of like how that entire game went. Just taking a really senseless 5-minute major, and now the risk is, right now we're recording, it's like 1:20. NHL Department of Player Safety, usually around this time is when they start to make those decisions. And if Barzal even gets one game, God forbid if he gets any more than one, you're trying to advance the cup, trying to beat the defending champions without your star center through the next 2 games, potentially. Not a great look. At that point, I don't know what else Barry could have said to them. He probably gave them a verbal lashing in the first period, and then after that, what the heck do you even say to a team like that? It's like, well, we can't do that on Wednesday. At the very least, I'm not sure. And it beckons the question, too, because Varlamov, I don't think it was his fault, but he let in a few soft goals. Do they turn to Sorokin now, as they've kind of alternated throughout the, from Varley to Sorokin against Pittsburgh, from Sorokin to Varley against Boston? Now, is it time to make that switch again? Should it already have been made? More than likely, Trotz is going to want to shake a lot of variables, and I think this team gets better from the net out. When they see the goalie making big saves early in the game, it gives them a little juice, and they kind of build off of that, which is how I think they generate a lot of their wins. And interestingly enough, in the Islanders-Tampa series, when the team that scores first in any of the games so far has won the game. So scoring first as well, not chasing from the get-go or not trailing from the get-go for the Islanders. has been a big part of this series, because when they establish themselves, they do a pretty good job of maintaining that. And when they don't and they have to chase, Tampa's a much harder team for them to catch up to than it has been against Pittsburgh or Boston.
Those are a lot of good points you mentioned there. I know you were talking about the goalies with the difference between Sorokin and Varlamov. Who do you expect to be between the pipes for Game 6? I know you mentioned how Barry Trotz likes to make adjustments. It's kind of like a "what have you done for me lately" type of mentality, or who matches up best against this powerful Lightning offense. Who do you think? I mean, do you think it's Varlamov? Do you think they should go back to Sorokin?
You stick with the hot hand until it goes cold, right?
Mm-hmm.
And coming out of Game 3, they didn't play a horrible game by any means, but I think it was the same behavior that we've seen of them in Games 2, obviously big time in 5, where they didn't press Tampa as much. They had a lot of one-and-done offensive chances, and that's more on the forwards. But psychologically with this team, again, I said they kind of get more energy from the net out. And when they make those changes, sometimes they know they have two really excellent goalies, but in the Pittsburgh series, in Game 3, Varley couldn't buy a save. They went to Sorokin. He locked it down after that. I mean, he bailed them out in Game 5 of that Pittsburgh series. Same deal. Sorokin blows Game 1. They know they have two good tendies, and Varley's been has matched well against the Bruins. Game 3, he lets in a little bit of a weird Marchand overtime winner, but, Trotz doubles down. He says, no, Varlamov's the guy here. As well as Varlamov has played, both in this series and in the series last year in the bubble, I just don't know if you put him back in there, especially after he got just torched in the first period of Game 3, the first period of Game 5, and in the way, the Game 3 in Boston and the Game 3 in Tampa had two common themes. The Islanders weren't blown out by any means, but they struggled to produce a little bit offensively, and the goals that were allowed by the goalie were really not the greatest looks. Not to blame the goaltender, but that's an instance where he doesn't steal the game. Against Tampa and against that Lightning offense that you mentioned, I think Sorokin's the guy who's going to steal the game just from his athleticism. If he gets in and settles in early from the get-go, instead of being thrown into what's already at that point a 3-0 game, I think he's going to produce a better quality saves and better quality a start for the Islanders. And like I said, he just makes a few saves. He gets comfortable 0-0 in the beginning of the game. I think Sorokin's going to be the guy, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that's enough on Game 5. We'll kind of save. We'll move on to Game 6 now. What are your general thoughts? And this is more or less a question about the history of the team, about what could be the last game in the barn. Do you have any general thoughts on that? Is there any emotional strings attached to this game? Regardless of what happens in the series, it would be nice for the Islanders to end, their time there with a win.
Big time. And a win. I mean, the ultimate goal obviously is the cup. And just because of how close they are, 2 wins away from an appearance and then 6 total wins away from another championship. Yeah, you want to close it out with a cup, but at the very least, it's really hard. And I know we're not going to talk about Game 5, and it's just a really bad look to come from that back home. But like we said, the result's the same either way, and the Islanders make their bread and butter through Barry Trotz on the rebound games. I can't tell you the record off the top of my head, but I can tell you that through the last 3 years he's been here, when they have coming off of a bad loss, they tend to rebound very, very well. Plus, going into what was sure to be probably the most raucous crowd to date, with the expectations on and knowing that it's do or die, either shake hands or try again in Tampa for Game 7. It's just very, very hard to imagine them losing that game. And yeah, it'll be beyond emotional because, yeah, it very well could be the last game ever, this time for real, at Nassau Coliseum. This isn't no 14-15 where, they're going across the pond to Brooklyn, they'll come back, and this is it. And I don't know if that's actually settled in with Islanders fans yet fully because of the emotional rides of the end of 14-15 and, we're going to Brooklyn, we're coming back. They had the one preseason game in 17. A year later, they announced they're coming back, and then they do the hybrid Brooklyn. And so I think it won't settle in with fans until they're in that building, but it's going to be probably one of the loudest nights, or one of the loudest games that building will ever see. And you take the Tavares game, you take Game 6 against both the Penguins and Bruins. That those crowds were wild. It'll stand up there all time, that's for sure. And that can't be understated, especially with guys like Josh Bailey. Poor Anders Lee, who's had to watch this run from the sidelines as well. But this building, to those veteran guys who have seen 8,000 fans a night against Arizona on like a weekday, those guys who have been through the throes that this franchise has been through. I think it's mostly for them, and those are the guys that I always expect to step up, like the Bailey, Barzal, Pageau, Nelson, Brock Nelson, big time. I mean, those are the veterans that you would expect to in these games to step up, and I think that we could expect some big performances out of them, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned how important Barry Trotz is to this team as the head coach. Barzal has stepped up. He's done an outstanding job in the absence of Anders Lee, as you mentioned. Josh Bailey, Martin, Nelson, whoever it's been, they've been, all pitching in. But for me, one of the keys to the game is stopping Braden Point. The guy has scored a game in all 5 games of the series. He has, I believe, 13 goals in the playoffs, 5 goals in the series. What is the key to stopping him and that Lightning offense featuring guys like him, Stamkos, and Kucherov?
To add to that, I'm pretty sure that Braden Point just broke a franchise record with Tampa for scoring goals in, I think, 6 or 7 straight playoff games. And now I think he's just made it 7 with the goal that he had last night. So forget, he's smashed the Tampa Bay record, owns it in full now. And, so there's frustration on the side of Islanders fans, but I'm kind of taking the approach of, we have to remember why Tampa Bay are where they are. They have Braden Point alternating in the middle 6. They have Kucherov, Stamkos, Point, Palat, John. Like, this roster might as well be an all-star team from the East Coast or the Eastern divisions, frankly. Stopping them, truthfully, it's kind of what they did in the Boston series. There's certain guys that you're either going to have, a very hard time stopping, or you're probably not going to stop all of them. Let them take the shot. Just let them take the worst possible shot, fight for every inch of it, get the sticks in the shooting lanes, get the body up the same way that, not to change too drastically, but Montreal's kind of doing the same thing right now. They're playing big body type of style hockey. They're just clogging the shooting lanes, getting everything in front. Let it hit me, my stick, my skate, my helmet, whatever. As long as it does that, it won't get to the goalie. They're going to get their chances. They're going to get goals. Braden Point's already been scoring a goal, and like you said, in every single game this series and in some from the prior series in Carolina. That streak has continued. So as far as containing them, just do the best that you can, but that their best has to be what they brought in Game 1, where they limited them successfully, albeit maybe a little bit of a not tired, but Tampa was kind of between series. They were a little inactive. So that Game 1, not totally indicative, but kind of indicative of what the Islanders can do. They forced Tampa to play their game, which they haven't really done since. So that'll be it. Just play them hard, get in the shooting lanes, and make life uncomfortable for them. Because that once they start, like I said before, if they start to reel back and give them that time and space, it's gone. Because Tampa only needs not even an inch to do some serious damage against any team in this league.
We talked about how Barzal has 3 goals in this series, but you hope somebody else steps up in Game 6. I kind of want to get into a series prediction here. I mean, there's really only 3 options. So, Matt, what are you thinking? Do the Islanders come back and win it in 7, or does Tampa Bay win it in one of these next 2 games?
My heart wants to say Isles in 7. My brain is telling me Tampa in 7. But it's either way, I really can't see them losing in Game 6 tomorrow. It's just, historically speaking, they have all of what they've done in the last 3 years working in their favor, because all the signs point to a big comeback game in 6. But once it goes to Game 7 in Tampa, I just don't see Tampa dropping that kind of game unless the Islanders play the most ridiculous road game they've ever played under Barry Trotz of all time. Barry Trotz is a genius. He's playing chess, and he has an idea of what his pieces are, how to utilize them, what he can do to negate John Cooper's guys. But I don't want to say it like this, but they might just be in parts of this game where they have been playing pretty well. They're just getting out talented,
Right.
and if they're gonna win with over Tampa's superior talent, they'll just have to take their work ethic and turn it up to levels they've never even been seen before. That's the only way that they're going to be able to do it, because they have the talent, but Tampa owns the talent. Frankly, I can't stop talking about how stupid deep, just from offense to playing McDonough as a cat. Like, sometime has McDonough rotated on the third pairing? I don't even know, because it's just the amount of players, the amount of options that they have, and even the guys on the shelf for Tampa, just ridiculously strong in all options. It's going to take a lot to beat Vasilevsky, but I think more than that, it's about just not letting the Islanders beat themselves, because a lot of this, like I said, they allow one goal, and mentally they need to be more resilient to press out and continue to challenge, rather than behaviorally as a team and as a unit kind of turtle, condense, and just just get too lost in the trap, get too lost in protecting the net. So my heart, Isles in 7, my brain, Tampa in 7, long and short.
So you convinced me, Matt. But before this interview, I'm saying Tampa Bay's winning in 6, because it's very difficult to have a 2-day turnaround coming off an 8-0 loss. But between it being potentially the last time in the barn, the Islanders they're going to have that home crowd behind them in Game 6. I actually do think they're going to win Game 6, but heading back down to Tampa in Game 7, I think it's just going to be too much. You mentioned that firepower that Tampa Bay has. Vasilevsky has been outstanding the entire series, as where teams with the best goalies usually advance in these playoffs, and Vasilevsky's been outstanding. Price has been outstanding, and that's why these teams are still in the mix. And the Islanders right now are kind of in a situation where we don't even really know who's starting in Game 6. It's not 100% certain. So I'm going to go Tampa Bay in 7. So that'll be my prediction.
Totally fair. Yeah,
we will see what happens. Also, one more question on the Islanders. What do you think of the cap situation heading into the next couple of years? I know there's a couple of guys that are coming up. They're due for contracts at around the same time. What are your overall thoughts on that?
Look, so just to preface, last offseason, coming into this year, Lamoriello makes a trade that he says he never wanted to have to. He deals Devon Taves, really stud, young, up-and-coming defenseman in the Colorado Avalanche, and basically for a couple of picks, and he did not want to have to make that trade, but cap implications forced his hand. Now, here's I'll give you a brief list of guys who are going to be restricted or UFAs next year: Beauvillier, Cizikas, Kiefer Bellows, Otto Koivula, who some of these guys might be lower on the depth chart, but besides that, Adam Pelech. Adam Pelech is going to earn his pay, and he might not be the sexiest or the flashiest D-man. He doesn't put up big numbers. He doesn't put up a lot of points, but Adam Pelech is the biggest gear in what the Islanders do in terms of shutting teams down defensively and making them play a more structured and, boxed out game. He's going to command a lot of money. The same thing goes to Ilya Sorokin, their, stud Russian goaltender, who rumor has it, Sorokin is the reason they even brought Varlamov in the first place, to build that Russian bridge to acclimate him better to the team. He needs to get paid. He's coming off. They gave him, I think, $2 million this year, Sorokin. He's probably going to be chasing Varley's payday of about $5 million. Adam Pelech probably earns about $5 million. Besides that, you've got guys excuse me. You've got guys coming in. Barzal's signed, but in 2 years, you have to think about how to structure these deals, because now in two more years, Barzal's probably going to want more than the $7 million he's making. It's going to be it's going to be a big mess. That's the best way to put it. which is why I think that Lamoriello really wanted to go forward with this core because, the fourth line guys, Clutterbuck's got one more year on his deal after this year, and that's it. So the fourth line might get broken up. Who knows what the top six will look like? They've got to keep Pelech. Does that mean that they get rid of Nick Leddy, who, by the way, Leddy, $5.5 million, his last year is this year. Or, I'm sorry, next year, 21-22, not 2021. He's going to need money soon. Polak's next last year is this coming. So he'll need a contract next year. It's going to be a mess, and I'm really afraid of what this roster will look like. With Trotz, now here's my thinking. I'm not sure it matters how much turnover there is. It matters for the chemistry of the locker room, for the structure of their game. They convinced me in 18-19 when they replaced you-know-who with Filppula, Komarov, Martin they brought back. I'm convinced that Trotz can make almost anything work, but I'm convinced for the integrity of that locker room, how well they're able to keep this together because, like you mentioned, the Islanders don't have any or many stars. There's Barzal, Eberle, guys like that, but they make their bread and butter off of keeping a tight-knit group together, playing, getting contributions up and down the lineup, making sure that everybody's contributing something. And I think that kind of plays into the character that's in this locker room of guys who have been together for a long time. This formula, I think, is very unique. Apologies on that. This formula is very unique, and what could be the most dangerous thing for the Islanders is risking having it broken up by having a couple key guys just either leave or get swapped with different players. The chemistry's in danger, and I fear that this may be the window outside of this year might be a little, waning, and we won't know until we get there. But I'll tell you this, Tom, it's going to be very interesting to see what Lamoriello does to try and circumvent a lot of these pressing issues here with the cap. Hopefully it goes up. Hopefully it goes up as, Toronto made that bet when they signed all their 11 million guys that it would go up. Hopefully it goes up, but if not, it's going to be a very interesting set of games to see what can be done to keep them together.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if they're able to extend that championship window. But two more questions. The Montreal-Vegas series, they are currently tied 2-2. I think the Canadiens, the Habs, have surprised a lot of people, shades of 1993. Let's predict that series because my prediction before the playoffs started was actually Vegas and Tampa Bay, and that is still potentially intact. Who do you think is coming out of that semifinal? And if the Islanders were to advance, who would they match up best against?
Well, starting with the matchup with Vegas, Montreal, Vegas did a lot to get to where they have been. And one thing, not to keep going, but when Vegas opened their series against Colorado, they got thumped 7-1. And it from there, looked like the Avs were in the driver's seat after that game by all intents and purposes. Then they take the 2-0 series lead and they bring it back into Vegas in the Avs absolutely buzzing. What happened after that is Vegas kind of remembered the style of hockey they play, which is it's a very fast speed and transition-oriented game, but they have the physicality on the blue line and in their forward core to play also a really shut-down, grindy type of game without compromising on the factor of speed and high transition. They do that really well, and I think that's what stunted Colorado most when they advanced to face Montreal, was the resiliency in their style of play matched up well against the team with more speed and less grit. And now they're playing Montreal, a team that has less speed and much more grit, much more. So it's kind of interesting to see that matchup, especially with Price versus Fleury, and then as of Game 4, Robin Lehner. This one, although I want to root for Montreal because they play a similar style of hockey that the Islanders do, in that they're more grinded out, a absorb the offense and then turn mistakes into goals. But Vegas has enough of that grit factor, I feel, and enough of that physicality to be able to play that style with Montreal, wear them down, and then use their potent offense to kind of turn the table. Honestly, with Game 5 in Vegas tonight, I expect the Knights, not necessarily a blowout, hopefully for Montreal's sake, not what we saw yesterday's Game 5, but Knights probably take control in Game 5. And honestly, I know Montreal's done really well at home, and their backs will be against the wall, but I don't see any reason why the Knights just can't buckle down, realize the position that they're in, and take the next two. So I honestly see Vegas, whether it's going to be in 6 or 7 coming out of that Western Series, they're back to the final, I think, for the second time since inception and the first time in 3 whole years for that starving Vegas fan base that just needs an ounce of success for their team. No, I think Vegas can more than come out of it. I think Montreal's basically had their run. I think this is probably where they hit that wall.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I have Vegas winning the series. I think Montreal's had an outstanding run, but Vegas, I mean, you mentioned they've been to this point 3 times since in their 4 years as a NHL team. So they have the experience factor for going for them. Excellent players in McNabb, Pacioretty. Yeah. They're just an outstanding hockey team. I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury is one of the best goalies to have ever done it. I believe he just came up on his, I want to say, 18-year anniversary of being drafted. So I think he was picked in 2003. So,
oh, you're right. Yeah, first overall, too. Second goalie to be taken first overall in the NHL draft. Wonder how that worked out for the first one.
But yeah, I'm going to go Vegas. I would not be shocked if Montreal extends the series a little bit if they get one more game, but Vegas will win this series.
Same. Yeah, I pretty much agree. And you know what? It's pretty much the same vibe that you get with the Vegas Montreal and with the Tampa Bay Islanders. Like I said, my heart wants them to pull it, but I think either way, regardless of what they do and either team does in 6, yeah, your final prediction is looking pretty good right now.
Absolutely. And last question, I know we're both big New York hockey fans, and I know as a Rangers fan, I'm very excited to have Gerard Gallant as the next head coach of the New York Rangers. Had his press conference today. One of the takeaways, I just read this in an article, he wants to be the hardest working team in hockey. I mean, who doesn't, number one? And, just watching these playoffs, seeing the teams that are,
he said that.
Yeah, he did say that. He said, I want them to be the hardest working team in the league, Gallant said at his introductory press conference on Tuesday morning after hiring last week. I want them to work hard, compete hard. I want people to say they compete for 60 minutes, and that's why they're winning hockey games every night. If we don't put it in the work, skill, and talent, we won't win. So I think Gallant is the guy for the job. What scares me is that, and this is nothing against him as a coach, but his track record is 3 years, 3 years, 3 years with his previous 3 teams. And that, I mean, technically, I believe he was the Panther. He was the Florida coach for 4 years. That includes the strike season. But
right.
That is a little bit concerning. Will he be here for the long haul, or is he more of a bridge? As we're David Quinn, you kind of knew he was here for the rebuild process.
Right.
Now Gallant, is he here to help this team win a championship? So what I took away from this press conference, I get a lot of mixed reviews from it. I'm still a little uncertain.
Honestly, and coming from the headlines preceding or following, the firing of Jeff Gordon and John Davidson, and then soon after David Quinn. Obviously, Caps fans want to troll and they want to think that, Tom Wilson got your front office fired. In reality, James Nolan, in the 2-game series that they had against the Islanders before the regular season concluded, was at those games, and James Nolan said himself, this is the difference between both teams. Like you have one team with grit and championship ready pedigree, championship ready, not championship pedigree. Just want to make that distinction. They haven't won anything yet. And versus obviously the Rangers with a lot more skill, finesse, a lot more offensive ability, but not necessarily able to withstand the physical aspect of the game. That's where Dolan said he made the decisions to do what he did. Now, Chris Drury, I like the hire, honestly. And as an Islanders fan, I'll even tell you that, when I saw the Gallant hiring, I muttered a few expletives because I knew, honestly, he's the best coach suited for them in the position they're in. They're a team that kissed the playoff line just a couple of times in the last few seasons. And in all honesty, probably should have been a playoff team this year. They have the talent to do it. Their defense a little thin, sure, but they have two rocks in net again with Georgiev and Samsonov. It was a really good decision because a few off seasons ago when they were doing the 3-man rotation, they were teasing, a possible trade. Just there was speculation occurring that they might off like a Georgiev or a Samsonov and keep either Hank and, obviously they did the right thing for the franchise, which was keep the two young bucks. And, the fact that Gallant said that he wants to be the hardest working team, that sounds an awful lot familiar. I might have heard a similar mantra when the Islanders brought in their new head coach a few years ago. So that's bad news for the Metro and bad news for the Islanders fans because it's going to make the Rangers a heck of a lot more competitive. And it's kind of like I've been saying with the Islanders, when you realize that you may be, and this really isn't what the Rangers are dealing with much, but I would say the Rangers' biggest problem is their thin D. But when you're dealing with maybe not so much talent, you can offset that now by compensating with a lot of hard work and a lot of a good work ethic. If Gallant's going to come in and establish that from the get-go, it's going to be a bad time, frankly, for an already very tight, very packed Metro division. Do the Flyers kind of revitalize themselves next year? Do the Penguins make some – I mean, the Penguins just won the division, so you have the Pens, the Caps, the Islanders, the Bruins, obviously. The Bruins are kind of in transition, but they're still a force. The Rangers should be way better next year, and if everything goes back to the way it was pre this whole nonsense, then you have the Hurricanes to add into that. And honestly, you're just left with the Blue Jackets and Devils, and that's like 6 of 8 teams in a division that are all vying for – you have 2 teams, Carolina and Pittsburgh, that want to defend their division pennant. So, like I said, if everything goes back next year, it's going to be wild. And it's not good news. If you're not a fan of the Rangers, it's not good news. That's my honest assessment. If I were a Rangers fan, I would be very happy. I would be very excited for next year.
Yeah, I'm very happy as a Rangers fan. I'm not so sure. My concern is how long is he going to be here?
Right.
That's my biggest concern. But I'm not going to base that
about that now, though.
Yeah,
I don't know if that should even be. What happens in 2-3 years happens. But in the short term, Quinn was the guy who kind of got things off the ground, and now Gallant is the guy who's pulling them over the playoff line, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I was upset when they fired David Quinn. I was a little upset. I'll be honest, but the option that we got was probably the best guy on the market, 100%.
Best available by far.
So,
and you're probably really glad because there was an insinuation they might even go back to Tortorella. You're probably really glad that they didn't go.
That was considered. That was considered. That would have been something else. I don't. Yeah, he was definitely one of the higher up candidates for the Rangers. But Matt, wanted to thank you so much for your time today, for joining me here on this podcast, talking all things New York Islanders, sprinkling in a little Montreal Vegas talk and the Gerard Gallant press conference. Matt, before I let you go, why don't you tell the folks and the listeners where they can find you, plug your social media, your YouTube page, this and that.
Yeah, definitely. So YouTube, it's Big Red Isle, like one ISLE cast. That's one word. Or just look up my name, Matt Di Giacomo, on YouTube. Can't miss me, the dude with the big poofy red hair. I'm talking Islanders, but, I love the Mets. I'm a big Jets fan. I work for the Red Bulls, obviously, so I love soccer. I've kind of got my hands all over the place. That's where you could find me. And on Twitter at MD Giac. That's my Twitter, my YouTube, and from there you could definitely get the rest. Tom, thank you for reaching out. This has been a blast. I can't remember the last time I did something in this format. I like this a lot. Yeah, thanks for reaching out, man. Yeah, hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, we really appreciate you coming on the show. We'll have to have you back in the future, but until then, thank you very much. And we're going to head back to review and preview.
Let's go Islanders!